Hi everyone. So I'm Jodie Pearson. I'm the team leader for Somerset Phoenix Project, and also a practice lead with the Centre of Expertise. So I'm just going to run through a little bit of what Phoenix does and some of our key underpinnings really in our work, because I thought that might be quite useful for you guys to hear. So we are a specialist support service, and we work alongside children, young people and their families who've got lived experience of child sexual abuse who live in Somerset. So we have been around for 8 years now. We've just secured a tender to continue delivering for 6 years plus 2, which is fabulous because we can do some real developmental things and expand the service to what it needs to be. Essentially, our service is made up of, it's a real combination. And I think what Anna was saying as I came into her piece around really listening to the voice of the child and making sure that we don't do anything they don't want us to. It's kind of echoed in the fact that we need to have a real range in our workforce to support them, and quite a few different toolkits, because there is no one right way to support a victim or survivor of CSA. So we're basically a team that's made up of teachers, ex-police officers, social care staff, occupational therapists, pastoral leads, psychotherapists, play therapists, an IDVA, a CHIPSVA, so both an independent domestic violence advisor on our team, as well as a child sexual abuse advisor that previously worked with SafeLink. So it's a real range, and that means we can really tailor support to children, young people and families as much as we can. That said, we cover the whole of Somerset. So if you have a home address or a NHS, if your GP is in Somerset, then you meet our criteria, because we're commissioned by ICB, which means we have long wait times that are far longer than we would like, but we are working really hard to reduce those. And in addition to that, we also have a waiting well offer through virtual support, anonymous virtual support, as well as direct support from our wonderful waiting well worker, who will offer onward signposting and advice and general emotional support while you're waiting for your therapeutic offer. So we offer a trauma-informed CBT approach where appropriate. A large part of our role is advocacy, and that is both for children and young people as well as their parents and carers. So we do have a safe parent carer offer in Phoenix service. It is very limited. We have a very small amount of funding for it, and that can either be through advocacy work and thinking about the practicalities of what happens after you've disclosed sexual abuse, your family has been blown apart, and you need to figure out housing, or taking time off work, or perhaps having hassle from the perpetrator that then is, perhaps in a relationship with someone in your family, and we need some civil injunctions in place before we get to the point of any criminal prosecution, if that's the route they choose to go. And that's basically what I can support that parent in those moments where they feel really alone. So yeah, essentially that's the Phoenix service in a nutshell. And what I wanted to kind of go on to talk about a little bit was what underpins the way we work with young people. So we have our support is long term, and some of that is because CSA is not an event orientated trauma. It can't be defined in a single and by a single event that has happened. It's process orientated, and that may be different throughout that child's life. And some of those effects are short term and some are long term. Quite often this is a bit of a myth that we still really fight now, is on referrals to Phoenix. They'll be saying it's okay because you're going to go and see Phoenix, and there's this real idea that we're going to fix them, which I hate for several reasons, because arguably they're not broken. They've had an experience that is the most horrific experience imaginable, but we know there is a lot of research that says with the right support that person can go on and live a really happy full life. But I think it is that misunderstanding that we have a referral quite often. Let's say when they're little, when they're about 8 years old, they might do play therapy with us for a long period of time. We get that young person to the point where they are as far as they can go with processing their lived experience of sexual abuse or harm. They move on from the Phoenix service and need to come back later in adolescence, maybe when they start puberty and other elements of development. In a bigger school, you're finding some of that experience really important. So that's why we try and mirror that in the kind of support that we give. So we're trying to oppose kind of the impact at every step of the way. So, I mean, this isn't the only trauma, by the way, that is like that, obviously, but it is the combination of the trauma-causing factors that make CSA such a significant life event to overcome for survivors. I think probably our key message as well to a lot of referrers is that we need to remember that sometimes when that young person, that child experiences what people tend to throw away, I'm sure Anna would agree, as a dissociative state, flashback, we use those terms quite freely now, but actually for a young person and a survivor of sexual harm, any age actually, but for a survivor of sexual harm and sexual violence, that is as if the trauma happening right now occasionally when you've been triggered. And we're really trying to advocate that people stop doing that. Well, you need to get over it, you need to park it and move on. We can put these reasonable adjustments in the short term, but eventually you're just going to have to deal with it, that type of thing, particularly around and I was going to say education, but I'll give a preamble to that actually education are far and away the service that are engaging with us as much as humanly possible and really welcoming any kind of support around supporting survivors in Somerset at the moment. And some schools doing really amazing jobs. But I think it becomes really tricky, doesn't it, when you've got conflicting pressures. So you've got the need to have that child back in education. We know it mitigates the risk of exploitation. We know routine is very good for children who've experienced trauma and abuse. All of those things are kind of pulling one way, and our role is to think, well, yes, that's great, okay, for that child and what they've been through and their lived experience and what our equivalent would be as an adult being expected to go back to work. That wouldn't happen. So a lot of our role is taken up by kind of being the voice of the child as much as we can. Always with their consent, obviously. In Phoenix, we're really trying to embed the thinking around that road to recovery. So people will assume that a child or a survivor of child sexual abuse will just get better on a linear path. As you can see, that little diagram in the middle, that little graph, and actually that isn't the case. So it's absolutely okay to refer young people into Phoenix or their whole family into Phoenix. And then find that we need to re-refer them back in later on, because that isn't generally how recovery, what it looks like. It can be a bit of a wiggly line, and we really welcome those conversations. It's important for children and young people to feel like they have got those safe and supportive adults that can gently soothe their threat response. So in Phoenix, we quite often have to manage expectations around the work that we're delivering. So lots of people will assume that everybody who has experienced sexual will want or need therapy, and we know that's not the case. Generally, they need an understanding, compassionate adult, and will occasionally choose to engage in therapy. Which is what our specialist support workers do. So they'll work alongside a young person out in the community for usually around 24 sessions. The reality of that is that it looks like about a year's long support on a weekly basis with the same person. But that's flexible again, depending on what the young person's circumstances are. And largely, most of that work will focus on us being able to widen that window of tolerance, that green bit on the diagram on the left, thinking about how we are able to soothe some of those trauma responses and give them techniques and skills and tools to be able to tolerate, like from a strengths-based perspective, integrating back into what was previously their usual routine and usual life, if that's what they want to do. It is that is what a large chunk of our work is, and I would say at the moment what we're seeing the most of our referrals for is that outreach specialist support model, as opposed to our therapy model, which is coming into us and having either arts and creative counselling, play therapy, or psychotherapy, and we've got trauma. We're in our practice, but it's far and away that community and specialist support work is our most popular at the moment. This is just a bit of a takeaway for you guys, really. Just think whether you need to be a specialist. There's certainly a space. That's why services are commissioned to be specialists in this area, whether that's us or the Centre of Expertise or the SARCs. However, there are things that we can all be doing for our children and young people. So when I talked earlier about the trauma causing factors that are involved in sexual abuse, I've just created this little grid that gives you some really clear bullet points on the right about what you can do to offset those factors that have been caused in trauma when the harm has been perpetrated. And that's what we need to do, is ensure we embed that all the time. So thinking about particularly giving as much control, consistency, and informed consent as we possibly can to the survivor. These are kind of the foundations of Phoenix, again, in making sure that there's predictability, transparency, the power with, not power over, which is very similar to Anna's strapline at the end of the SARC, that we cannot emphasize enough how important it is that survivors feel that they are working, within, they are giving you informed consent and they are choosing their pathway. Working with mutual respect is really, really important. And if you look at all the things in those purple blobbies, for want of a more technical way of putting it, if you look at all the things in those purple blobbies, pretty much the opposite is what would have happened to them during the sexual abuse or harm, and what will have been taken away from them. And it's really important that we're doing everything we can to put that back and give them a sense of choice again. So some top tips really from Phoenix for people to take away is just thinking about how we're speaking to our young people, I think would be, all people would be really important. I think being, providing as a foundation of trust, whether you've got 10 minutes or one assessment or whatever you've got with that child or young person, is absolutely key. And being really open and honest. So if you're saying to them, you should hear back from us within 2 days, make sure they hear back from you within 2 days. If for some reason you can't, we are not infallible at Phoenix. That happens. Own it and tell them that it's your fault and that you are the ones that should have got back to them. Those kind of things go a long, long way. And it's really important for the future of the support that young person is going to receive, because they will be more likely to access support from the SARC in the future. They will be more likely to go and see a professional at Swish. They will be more likely to engage with Phoenix if they have had a really good response from that initial conversation in whatever guise, whether that's an initial disclosure or whether that is ongoing support, popping in to see somebody at Citizens Advice Bureau. What is if they've had a trauma-informed response just for that short space of time, with respect, they will engage better in the future. So I would urge you to think about that. I think sometimes being mindful that quite often when sexual violence has happened, you can get a bit stuck in your throat. So what I mean by that is don't always expect young people to respond verbally. Even if you're not talking about the disclosure, things can feel quite overwhelming. So finding other ways for them to respond to you would also be really important. Just in general, think about what's in your environment where you work, if possible. These are kind of the key takeaways. And just thinking about being human, being real. They will know if you're not. They'll see through it massively. providing, you know, comfort isn't just showing love and warmth, it's also giving young people a sense of grounding and safety. So all of these things are really important. I'm not going to go through them all because obviously we don't have time, but I just wanted you guys to have something to take away as kind of key things, even if you just pick a couple of those and think, you know, this is kind of part of what we call kind of the Phoenix magic. It's not rocket science. It's just the things that make young people feel able to engage with us to do the rocket science, which is their hard work and their recovery. Being really mindful of yourself as well is a real Phoenix kind of cornerstone. And by that, I don't just mean, I mean, Steve and I were even talking about it the other day, thinking about both the vicarious trauma and protecting your own well-being, but your own relationship with being able to talk about these topics and feeling okay, and, you know, having thoughts about, you know, thinking the unthinkable and things that we might not necessarily want to consider, and seeking support through that. So we would always heavily encourage the sector to be doing all of these things. It doesn't have to look like mindfulness or meditation. It's what works for you, as giving you enough resilience to be able to support young people in their stories. So just a few quotes from my team, really, thinking about what are the cornerstones of Phoenix support and what kind of approach children and young people will get if they come and work with us and work alongside us. So we don't other people. So survivors are not others. They are you and I, your son or daughter, your niece or nephew. CSA is not dictated by culture, religion, wealth or status, was one. So that, and we are seeing that improve. So we are seeing an increase in referrals from perhaps more affluent families or those accessing independent education, those kind of people that sit slightly above. But I think that's something I hold quite close to my heart, is this isn't, it's not, doesn't mean it's not going to happen to my child or my niece or nephew. It unfortunately is not boundaried in that way. So just holding that human nature a bit in mind, I think, is really important. Being trauma informed is not a checklist, it's a mindset. We have to think about it as a way of life rather than have I done all these things, tick, tick, tick. Always remembering that hearing a survivor's story is a privilege, and you must treat it with the compassion and respect it deserves. It is their story, not yours. Even when they give it to you and you have to do some safeguarding action with it, being as respectful and gentle with that story as you can is really, really important. It is theirs. And that bit around the grid that I showed you, where you have the dynamics of sexual abuse, is just remembering that in our roles as workers that are working alongside these families, we are privileged enough to be able to alter childhoods. And we really maintain that if we don't give a compassionate response to children, we are causing adversity, not mitigating against it. So you can repeat the patterns that they have experienced in abuse through not mitigating those behaviours. So we would really encourage you just to have that moment to think, am I mirroring anything here? And we are always here. So another part of Phoenix's role is to offer consultation, advice, guidance and training, and we'll be more than happy to have a conversation at any point if that is of use.